You know, ELO wasn't born in a garage. It was really born in the shadow of Abbey Road. Today, we're tracing the direct line between Jeff Lynne's sound and the Beatles' psychedelic studio wizardry. And trust me, this isn't just about influence. This was a mission. Before we get into that whole Sergeant Pepper effect, do me a favor. Hit that like button, ring the bell so you don't miss anything, and of course, subscribe for more deep dives into rock's real origins.
Okay, let's just start right here, because this quote, this is the smoking gun. This is Jeff Lynne himself laying it all out. He's not just saying he liked the song, he's saying that the weird, wonderful, string-drenched chaos of a Beatles B-side was the entire starting point for his career. He wanted to pick up the torch exactly where the Beatles left it.
So here's how we're going to unpack this incredible story. First, we'll dig into that mission, the one born from the Walrus. Then we're going to dissect the actual Abbey Road blueprint, all the studio tricks the Beatles cooked up. After that, we'll see how Lynne took that blueprint and built his own massive rock orchestra. And we'll finish with the ultimate prize, John Lennon's personal stamp of approval.
Right, so the first thing you have to get about ELO is that it wasn't some happy accident. This wasn't just a few guys from Birmingham who happened to sound a little bit like the Beatles. No, this was a deliberate, laser-focused project to continue the experimental, orchestral pop music that the Beatles had started and, by 1970, had just walked away from.
So check out the timeline. It's 1968, the same year a young Jeff Lynne gets to witness a session for the White Album in person, an experience he said changed his life forever. At the same time, Roy Wood, from the band The Move, gets this wild idea. What if you made violins and cellos a permanent, core part of a rock band? 2 years later, he gets Jeff Lynne, a fellow musician from Birmingham and a massive Beatles fanatic, to join him. And it's Lynne who says, no, this can't just be a side project. This has to be a whole new band dedicated to just this vision. So right from day one, the DNA was a mix of Chuck Berry and Beethoven, a concept the Beatles had made popular, but never fully committed to with a permanent lineup. And that's the key, right? Lynne and Wood weren't just passively influenced by the Beatles. They were actively trying to fill the void that the Beatles were about to leave behind. They saw the end of the Beatles not as an ending, but as a handover. They were on a mission to carry that specific legacy, the studio innovation, the pop genius, into the next decade.
Okay, now we get to the really fun, nerdy stuff. To understand Jeff Lynne, you have to understand the Abbey Road playbook. The Beatles, along with George Martin and their amazing engineers, completely changed the game. They stopped seeing the studio as just a place to record a performance. They started treating the studio itself as an instrument. And Jeff Lynne, well, he was their star pupil.
Let's start with a classic, ADT, or artificial double tracking. See, before 1966, if you wanted that thick, layered vocal sound, you had to sing the exact same part perfectly over and over. And John Lennon especially hated doing that. He found it incredibly boring. So an engineer at Abbey Road named Ken Townsend basically invented a solution just for him. He rigged up a system with 2 tape machines and a slight variable delay that automatically created that doubled sound. It was an absolute game changer.
You can draw a straight line from one to the other. The Beatles used ADT to get those dreamy, floating vocals all over the Revolver album. Jeff Lynne heard that, internalized it, and made it a cornerstone of the ELO sound. You know those massive, impossibly perfect vocal harmonies on a song like Mr. Blue Sky? That's Lynne taking the ADT concept and just pushing it to its absolute maximum.
And for any of you producers watching, this just shows how essential that trick still is. You can do this in your own software right now. Just duplicate a vocal, pan the 2 tracks hard left and right, add a tiny delay, we're talking 10 to 30 milliseconds to one of them, maybe a little bit of modulation, and boom, you're there. It's a Beatles trick from over 50 years ago that is still fundamental to pop production.
Next up, vari-speed. This is a simple concept with really cool results. You're literally just changing the speed of the tape machine when you record or play back. You speed it up, the pitch goes up, and it gets faster. You slow it down, everything gets deeper, heavier, and slower. The Beatles use this for all sorts of otherworldly effects, like blending 2 completely different takes of Strawberry Fields Forever, or getting that heavy, almost syrupy drum and bass sound on Rain by recording the track fast and then slowing the whole thing down.
And again, you can hear the spirit of this all over ELO's music. That feeling of a slightly off, dreamlike texture in their songs. The way some instruments sound a little bigger, a little more surreal than they should. That's Lynne using those same kinds of analog tricks to build his dense, layered, and sometimes pretty psychedelic soundscapes. He was walking the exact same path the Beatles had laid down.
The story on this one is just fantastic.
Apparently, an engineer accidentally threaded a tape machine backwards during the Revolver sessions. The Beatles heard it and just fell in love with how bizarre it sounded. This one happy accident led directly to the backwards guitar solo on I'm Only Sleeping and those weird, unsettling vocal sounds on Rain. It was pure creativity, just messing around in the studio, which was totally their thing.
And the blueprint just keeps going. They started using direct injection, or DI, plugging Paul McCartney's bass right into the mixing console on Sgt. Pepper's to get a bass sound with incredible richness and clarity. They began close miking the drums, putting microphones right up on the drum heads for that tight, punchy sound that defined their later records. Musically, they brought in what McCartney called his naughty chords, these really cool, sophisticated, diminished and augmented chords that added so much depth to their songs. And in the mix, they used dramatic hard panning to create these huge cinematic stereo images. Every single one of these things became a core part of Jeff Lynne's production toolkit.
So Jeff Lynne has this whole playbook, right? He knows all the tricks. But he's not just going to do a cover version. His big idea was to take the orchestral sounds the Beatles flirted with on Sgt. Pepper's and make that the central concept of an entire band. He wanted to build a real, living, breathing rock orchestra.
This is such a crucial distinction. For the Beatles, an orchestra was like seasoning. It was an arrangement choice, an added color, like that gorgeous string section on She's Leaving Home. But for ELO, the strings were a main ingredient. They were a core part of the band, with permanent violinists and cellists on stage and in the studio. Lynne didn't just add strings to rock music, he fused them together to create a brand new sound.
And this inheritance went way beyond just the sound. Sgt. Pepper's basically invented the modern concept album, an album that was meant to be heard as one complete piece of art. Jeff Lynne grabbed that idea and just ran with it. ELO's big breakthrough in the States was El Dorado, a full-on concept album about a dreamer escaping into his fantasies. He did it again with albums like Time. He wasn't just making hit singles, he was making these big, ambitious statements, just like his heroes did.
This table really nails the different mindsets in the studio. The early Beatles, with their simple 4-track machines, treated the studio like an experimental playground. It was all about pushing the limits of their gear. ELO, on the other hand, treated the studio like a giant orchestra. It was all about multi-track complexity, layering sound on top of sound to create something impossibly grand. You can see this clear evolution from a creative playground to a full-on sonic orchestra.
So we've laid out all the evidence. We've shown the mission. We've broken down the blueprint. And we've seen the evolution. But what did the guys who wrote the blueprint actually think? Well, that brings us to our final act, the moment the torch was officially passed by one of the Beatles himself. I mean, after all that work, after dedicating his entire creative life to chasing this one musical idea, did Jeff Lynne actually pull it off? Did the mission succeed?
The answer came in 1975, straight from John Lennon. In an interview, he just casually referred to ELO as the Sons of the Beatles. That's it, from the man himself. I mean, can you even imagine a higher form of praise than that? It's not just a compliment, it's an official acknowledgement of the family lineage. He heard what Lynne was doing, and he recognized it as the next generation.
And this wasn't just some off-the-cuff remark about the band in general. Lennon specifically said that the ELO song Showdown was one of his favorites. He heard that track with its funky groove, its soaring strings, its very Beatles-y melody, and he got it. He understood the mission, and he gave it his stamp of approval. For Jeff Lynne, that must have been everything.
And from that moment on, the story comes completely, beautifully full circle. Jeff Lynne's mastery of the Beatles sound became so famous that he was eventually hired by the Beatles. First, he co-produced George Harrison's huge comeback album, Cloud 9. Then he was producing legends like Tom Petty and Roy Orbison, often alongside George and the Traveling Wilburys. But the ultimate job came in the mid-90s when he was asked to produce the final 2 Beatles singles, Free as a Bird and Real Love. And get this, part of that job was being trusted to restore the audio quality of John Lennon's original raw demo tapes. The student who studied the blueprint was now the master builder, working with the original architects. It's just incredible.
And let's be clear, this vision was a massive worldwide success. ELO wasn't some little cult band for music nerds. We're talking millions and millions of albums sold. Songs like Mr. Blue Sky, Don't Bring Me Down, Evil Woman, they became part of the global soundtrack. It was proof that the musical DNA Lynne inherited wasn't just brilliant art, it was incredibly powerful and connected with people everywhere. So when you put it all together, the clear mission, the absolute mastery of the studio blueprint, the way he expanded on their ideas, and of course, the final endorsement from Lennon himself, it really all boils down to one big question. Is Jeff Lynne rock's greatest musical air? If you think so, smash that like button. If you think that title belongs to someone else, I absolutely want to hear about it. Tell me why in the comments. Either way, make sure you subscribe for more sonic history.